Testing. Can you hear me?
Hello.
Yeah, good.
Hello.
All right. Check, check, check. Hello, hello. It's great to see everyone. Welcome to the first Innovate State of the 2022-23 academic year. My name is Chris Sell, and I'm with the Burgess Institute for Entrepreneurship Innovation at Michigan State. For how many of you is this your first Innovate State experience?
Nice.
All right. Excellent. I suspect a few of you have Professor Smuziak for a class here this fall. So thanks, Professor Smuziak, for promoting this great event. It's so great to see all of you here. It's probably literally been close to 2.5 or 3 years since we've had this many people in this space for Innovate State. I know that last year, of course, we were in person, but attendance wasn't quite the same. And so it's so exciting to see so many people getting excited about our programming and engaged with what we're offering here this fall. So thanks again for being here tonight. Really appreciate it. I'm just going to give a few quick commercials and kind of rules of operation here this evening, and then I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Ken Smuziak, and to tonight's guest. First of all, I just want to thank the MSU Alumni Office for offering the live stream capability tonight. So welcome to not only the folks that are in the room, but also to Spartans and friends across the globe that are tuning in and watching this live stream this evening. For those of you that are looking to take notes, rest assured that tonight's conversation will be archived at the Burgess website so that you can watch this video for playback later on. We'll probably have this thing uploaded within about a week or so. Also want to thank all of the MSU ecosystem partners that make this education program for entrepreneurship come to fruition. That includes the MSU Foundation, Red Cedar Ventures, Spartan Innovations, and of course the MSU Innovation Center. I also want to mention a few things that are coming up here in the next few weeks. So I know many of you indicated this is your first Innovate State. For many of you, you probably have not experienced a 2-day venture program here. It's very similar to a startup weekend powered by Techstars. As Ken might call it, it's like pickup basketball for entrepreneurs. Essentially, it's a chance for you to have a tremendous amount of fun over 36 hours, and you get to form teams and work on business models, and you pitch at the end of 36 hours on a Saturday evening to a panel of judges. There's prizes. We feed you handsomely. So it's more than worth it just for the food that we give you on the Friday and Saturday. But I'll tell you, some of the best student ventures that have come through this program at Michigan State find their genesis at a 2-day venture. And so I think it's low cost or no cost this fall, if I remember correctly. And so there's really no barriers to entry. I highly encourage you to register. The first one is coming up September 30th and October 1st. Before that, however, coming up in just about a week or so, next weekend, we are hosting our first ever Venture Summit at Michigan State. It's a new fall campus tradition that we are launching here at the Burgess Institute, and it's for community members, alumni, students, staff, and faculty. So you are welcome to attend. There's no cost to register. We're going to be celebrating entrepreneurship education at Michigan State on that Friday, September 23rd. We're going to kick things off with the open house at the Hatch. Who's been to the MSU Hatch before? Excellent, some of you. And then we're also going to have an open house at the Venture Kitchen, which is in the Student Union, a space for students that are working on companies or ventures that might involve the needs for a commercial kitchen. So we're really excited to show off that space. Then we're going to have an expo here in this room featuring some of our more advanced student startup venture teams, as well as student organizations for entrepreneurship. How many of you are part of Women in Entrepreneurship or the Entrepreneurship Association? Anybody? Oh my goodness. I think we should probably have boosts for those organizations here to get new recruits. So definitely come here on Friday, September 23rd, a great chance to meet with new organizations that you might be really interested in. Lastly, that evening we'll be ending at the Broad Art Museum for a chance to meet with some of our student scholarship recipients and talk with alumni and donors that are making this program happen. So again, that's September 23rd and then 24th, that Friday and Saturday. Lastly, I'll just mention that, of course, Innovate State is not a one-time event. So the next Innovate State will be taking place next month, October 18th, featuring a more recent graduate of Michigan State, Malik Hull, who studied engineering and is now an engineer at Microsoft. So he's traveling from Seattle, Washington, to spend some time with you to talk about his experience in our program just a few short years ago, and now what it's like working full-time for one of the world's largest corporations. So he's really excited to come back next month, and he'll share his story with you then. Again, free to register, free to attend. we look forward to seeing many of you here that evening. So rest assured, I'd like to now move on to introducing my colleague Ken Smuziak and our guest this evening. I'm going to go ahead and give a very brief bio for our esteemed guest, but then I know that Ken and Kofi will have a chance to talk more about his career, certainly for the rest of this evening. But Kofi is the Chief Executive Officer at Bedrock, where he leads the full-service real estate company's efforts to build thriving urban centers through transformational development, community partnerships, and a commitment to support local small businesses. Since its founding, Bedrock and its affiliates have invested and committed more than $5.6 billion to acquiring and developing more than 100 properties, including some of the most significant new developments that Detroit and Cleveland have seen in decades. Bedrock's portfolio totals more than 22 million square feet of office, retail, and residential space with a new construction and adaptive reuse projects. He has an extensive experience in leading complex development projects in metropolitan areas. There's so much more to his story. Can't wait for you all to hear it tonight. And as Ken mentioned months ago when we were recruiting you to be here this evening, Ken mentioned he has a Wikipedia page. And if you have a Wikipedia page, we know that you're a pretty big deal. So if you could all join me in welcoming Ken and Kofi to the stage.
Thanks for joining us, Kofi. This is going to be fun. This is going to be a lot of fun. This is his first time to Michigan State, so this is cool and really exciting for me, and I know a lot of our staff. We're looking forward to having you here. 2 years pandemic. You've been at Bedrock for 2 years now, so the heat of the pandemic, you joined us. We'll talk about that tonight, but I always like to start these conversations with kind of that humanizing question of, what was college like for you, Kofi? Then maybe we could start from there. Start back at the beginning and kind of paint a picture of how you kind of launched into your career.
Happy to. Let me just start out with this Wikipedia thing.
Yeah.
Because it's interesting, because I didn't know I had a Wikipedia page. It's been up a few years now. And then one day, one of my classmates from Berkeley, I went to UC Berkeley, called me and said, God, you're doing so well in certain things. I started a Wikipedia page for you. I'm like, well, why would you do that? And so I went on. I'm like, but some of this isn't even true, nor is it accurate. But, then I try to figure out, how do you get it out? And apparently it's not that easy. So I don't know. It's not been updated in 15 years. So
if anyone wants to take liberties tonight based on the conversation, feel free. You can update in real time.
So anyway, so as I said, I'm originally from Ghana. Real quickly, I was born in Ghana, but I grew up in England. And then I went back to Ghana, finished high school, and also did my first degree in architecture in Ghana. Then I decided that I really wanted to participate in building communities, and I thought architecture would essentially be the pathway to a better world. So I picked a few schools, and I was lucky enough and I got to Berkeley. So student life for the first 3 months in Berkeley was awesome. I had a great government award, and I was living in some of the nicer sort of quarters. And 3 months into my life as a graduate student in Berkeley, there was a military coup in Ghana. And I distinctly, on December 31st, 1982, 1981. And I distinctly remember the first statements from the new head of state's mouth was, all those folks who are abroad eating our hard-earned foreign exchange dollars, we're cutting that off. And I looked to a friend of mine and said, I think he's talking about us. And true enough, cut off all our awards. And so, boy, all of a sudden, there you are as a student. And you have to figure out, what do you do now? Fortunately, Berkeley was pretty kind, and they helped us out with a little bit of an award. But it wasn't enough. So we moved from the penthouse to sharing a one-bedroom in North Oakland, and started looking for work.
Yeah.
So it was pretty formative, let me put it that way.
Yeah.
But it was great.
Yeah, life changes quickly.
Yeah.
And you studied architecture, but you seem to be drawn to development and kind of community. You've had a really interesting career after graduating. You kind of moved into kind of urban planning roles and community development roles.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about your public sector experience and how that kind of led to your private sector life? Maybe?
So I got out of, I finished graduate school in architecture, and then the economy wasn't great in the early 80s. It was sort of like this. Inflation was much higher, and oil prices was terrible. And the job market was terrible.
Yeah.
So I was trying to think, well, what should I do? And I thought, well, if you can't find a job, you may as well stay in school. So that's what I decided to do. So I applied for grad studies to do a master's in city planning and a PhD in architecture. Wasn't sure which one. So I asked one of my college professors who had become a mentor, what does he think I should do? Because he probably knew me the best. He said, you know what? I don't know what you do with a PhD in architecture. And I said, thank you, because I have no idea what I'll do either. But he said, but you seem to have this penchant for thinking about communities and everything. So why don't you do graduate studies in planning? So that's how I did that. And in the course of doing those graduate studies, I really began to think about how to put communities together from the governmental side. My first job out of grad school was actually building affordable housing in the city of Oakland. And that really spoke to sort of my social instincts. Built about 500 units in Berkeley and in Oakland. And in that process, I obviously had to deal significantly with the public sector. So out of the blue, I was asked to become the redevelopment director for a small city called Emeryville. And it was a very interesting city. It was an old industrial city. I mean, it was a city that had literally, it was surrounded, well, on the one side of Emeryville was the city of Berkeley, on the other side the city of Oakland, and across the way was San Francisco, and there's only 1.2 square miles. It's 1.2 square miles, mostly made up of industrial properties. And the tax base was all about industrial properties, essentially controlled by the industrialists. And they had literally seceded from Oakland because they didn't want to pay the higher taxes. Anyway.
Kind of like a Hamtramck or something.
Exactly.
Almost, right?
Highland Park. Hamtramck, Highland Park. Exactly. Very similar. And that was all great when industry was still cranking out in America. But when those industries decided to leave the shores of America, and certainly leave the Bay Area, you had 1.2 square miles of primarily industrial wasteland. And this city had come up with a plan, and they wanted to determine how to execute that plan. And so I was fortunate enough to be right on the sort of ground floor of thinking through how to execute their strategy. So that's how I got into the public sector.
Yeah, into the economic development space. And then you transitioned from there into doing more private sector work in San Francisco. Is that
no? Actually, you know what typically happens, and I say this to you all because as students, you will you find that you get to be decent at something, and when you get decent at something, you're given more responsibilities. You do more of that. And if you continue to do well, then they start thinking that maybe they should hire people under you so you can teach them how to do it. So next thing you know, you're running a department and you don't know what you're doing, but a lot of people supposedly are doing the right thing with you. And then if your department starts working well, people say, wow, if you're doing so well with that department, you need to come over here and help us run a bigger show. And so from Emeryville, I was recruited to become the deputy executive director for the San Francisco Redevelopment Agency. So I stayed in the public sector for another 3 or 4 years, actually 2 years. And in doing that, it's kind of funny, I was recruited back to the Bay Area, the East Bay, to become I think the title was the Community and Economic Development Agency Chief, the first one. And it's actually fascinating because the city came to realize that they had too many different departments. And many cities should actually take note, because what happens is when you have several different departments, you have several different department heads, and each department head kind of runs in their own lane. And certainly in the development, economic development, business development business that a city has, you have to coordinate various functions. You have to coordinate the economic development department. You have to coordinate the community development department, which typically deals with more of the social pieces. You have to coordinate the building department, because the building department provides the permits from which you get to build the buildings. And you often have to deal with the department that deals with all the grants, right? So and the planning department. I knew there was one key one that always says no to developers.
No, because they have a zoning map that says no.
Zoning map there, and they have higher aspirations for every lot in the town than the marketplace can bear. So they decided to collapse these departments and create a super agency, essentially. And I was the first chief of community and economic development agency, which was actually fairly thrilling.
Yeah. How did you feel in that role when you got to make something from scratch? Public sector work is an interesting animal, and you've described, I had a similar career path working in public sector government, real estate. It's such an interesting animal because sometimes the incentives don't quite align with that of the developers you're working with, right? So you have this private sector tension with the public sector wants and needs, and you were essentially put in this position where now you have to try to manage that. What were some of like the successes and what were the highs and lows of that experience to you? Like, what did you learn the most in forming a new position at that level?
I think that the hardest thing was getting everybody to align. I mean, you basically said it, because the planning departments see generally, I apologize to anybody who may have friends who work in planning departments, but I was a planner too. So the planning department generally believes that their plan is how the city must grow. What they don't typically think about is the economic marketplace that they're in, and they typically don't think about time. And they may well get to, the city may get to that sort of special place that they put on a piece of paper, but it may take 15, 20 years. So in the meantime, something has to happen on it. And they're not very good at making compromises today. And certainly the building department only cares about permits, and if it's not built a certain way, they won't give you the appropriate permits. And that can be frustrating if the building is an adaptive reuse, then maybe you need to change some of the ordinances in certain ways. Anyway, so that was pretty difficult. But I will say that the best part of it was once we finally got them to understand that individually they kind of were fighting each other, and they were seen individually as, or independently as part of the problem. When they came together, they actually saw themselves as potentially being very powerful, because now, for example, there were areas in the city of Oakland that had, frankly, a lot of dilapidated buildings, and it was becoming a hotbed of some criminal activity. So as the chief of community and economic development, commanding all the resources that actually commanded, I was able to say, okay, let's put all our resources here. Let's take the plan. Let's redo the plans. Let's go after the landlords. That's one of the first things. You go after folks who have left the buildings, just get dilapidated. Let's go after them. We're able, as an agency, I can talk to the public safety folks and get the police person that's on the beat to pay a little more attention to that area. I can bring some community development block grant money to the area, and I can literally make the planning process and permitting process, accelerate that process for anybody who's incentivized to spend money there. So essentially, you're able to command all the resources of a city, but focus it on a particular problem. And that was that was somewhat rewarding.
It's very innovative too, right? So, and I think why I'm so excited to have you as a guest tonight is oftentimes in Innovate State, we bring in someone who launch just a tech startup of some sort. I wrote code in my dorm room, and this is what it does, right? I think
the most billionaires.
Whatever, or not, right? Yeah. But I think it's interesting. Yeah. I like innovation at all levels, right? And I think a lot of students sometimes don't understand how maybe their career path will fit into being an innovative leader or an innovator in the public sector. But I think your message is 100% true, is that sometimes in those spaces it feels like the rules are set, but it takes that mentality that you just mentioned, right, and how to maybe rethink how to attack problems, which I think is core to the success of cities.
Yeah, I often tell frankly, the teams I'm with, let's make sure you identify your target. Often you find people don't identify the target, because if you identify the target you're trying to hit, then you have a much better chance of hitting it. And just following the rules and just trying to sort of follow along, you may never actually get to solve the problem you're really trying to solve for.
And I'm gonna circle back on this topic, because I want to learn about how you see real estate as a kind of as a gateway to enable entrepreneurship, which I think it does play a huge role, right? But you had an interesting stop-off after this and ended up 7 years in the NFL.
I did.
With the Cleveland Browns. Yeah. And how did that come about? And tell us about that experience.
Well, so I was at the city of Oakland for a while, as I just mentioned, and it just so happened that one of the more interesting parts of my professional life came about from a tragedy. The then city manager had a tragedy in his family life, and he quit. He resigned and left city government. And the city council asked me to be the city manager of the city of Oakland. I said, okay.
Give it a whirl.
I shouldn't have. Hardest job I've ever had. And I was there for about 3 or 4 months, and then I got a call from the then mayor of San Francisco, Mayor Willie Brown, who asked me to come back to join him in the city of San Francisco. So I had promised 6 months to the city of Oakland, so I finished the 6 months and I went to the city of San Francisco. In the city of San Francisco, I was the title was chief advisor, and nobody advises Willie Brown, but that was my title.
Or most mayors.
Or most mayors. Chief advisor to the mayor on economic development affairs. As it turned out, I was in charge of many of his economic development and sort of city building initiatives. But one of the most important things to him was trying to keep the San Francisco 49ers in San Francisco. And it's so interesting because most mayors, whether they care about sports or not, hate to be the mayor that loses a sports team.
Right.
And they'll stop whatever they're doing just to stop that from happening.
You can see it in Chicago right now. Playing out in Chicago. If anyone's a Chicago Bears fan. Right.
So I was his liaison to the San Francisco 49ers to find ways to keep them in the city. By the way, they are not in the city of San Francisco. They are actually down the street in Santa Clara, so I obviously didn't do a great job. However, in the process, I got to know the San Francisco 49er brass. And just around that time, the Cleveland Browns of 1996 decided to leave Cleveland and go to Baltimore to become the Baltimore Ravens. The good citizens of Cleveland went nuts. Yeah. And they went after the NFL, and the NFL finally cut a deal with them and gave them back their team, their history, and their colors. Some of you may have heard this. It's a fascinating story. But what happened was they then had to find the chief executive officer for the Cleveland Browns, the new Browns. And that happened to be the chief executive officer of the San Francisco 49ers, who accepted the job. And on his way, he said he'd like me to be his chief administrative officer. So I became the chief administrative officer of the Cleveland Browns.
Of the new Cleveland Browns.
Of the new Cleveland Browns. Yeah. I built the Cleveland Browns Stadium, and I ran the business for about 7 years.
Yeah. If you haven't been to Cleveland to see the stadium, it's awesome. On the river,
By the way,
it's really cool.
I go there all the time, and everybody's complaining about the stadium. I think it looks beautiful.
Yeah.
But they say, but it's 30 years old, which is 26 years old. But so they need a new stadium. Yeah.
This is debated
every
now.
sports team, right?
Everyone
Needs a new
As
stadium.
soon as one of them builds, they all got to build, right? So what was that experience like, and what called you back into essentially what was your exodus from the NFL after
Sure.
that? I mean, it's an interesting job. Like, you were kind of in facilities, you're in major planning around this brand, but it's tied to sports and it's tied to these
Yes.
athletes. And you went from San Francisco to Cleveland,
Yes.
and then back again,
I
right?
tell you, we had the family, family. We had a great time in Ohio, in Cleveland. Part of it was because it was pretty cool being in that industry,
arena. Yeah,
and it was very different from obviously the public sector. So there's some cool experiences. Traveling with the team was pretty cool. But after a while, I will admit to you that it really was fun from Friday through Sunday.
Yeah.
Monday through Thursday wasn't that much fun because it's pretty repetitive business if you think about it, right? Yeah. I mean, and so people like me would dwindle in interest. There's so many things we weren't particularly involved in on the football side. But I would spend time with the coaches and try to understand how they thought about things, because you know what, we didn't win very much.
Right.
On the business side, we were number 4 and 5 in the league in revenues.
Passionate
business.
fan base.
Great.
Yeah.
But we were like 2 and 14, and it wasn't great. And I'd often have those existential conversations with the coach about why are we losing so much. Right. Those are fun times. But anyway, the reason I left the Browns is primarily the owner that recruited both Carmen and essentially myself. He passed away. Okay. And there was a transition in ownership to his son, who was actually a good friend of mine, but he wanted to bring in his leadership, which is fine. Yeah. That's what happens. Yeah. For a short time, I actually worked for MBNA. I was the regional executive vice president for MBNA, because MBNA was owned by the Lerner family that owned the Cleveland Browns, and they didn't want me to leave the area. So, but it's one thing, I say this to folks, it was one thing being in Cleveland running a football team. It's another thing being in Cleveland and running a credit card company. Right. And so then I got recruited to come back to San Francisco. And I became the regional vice president for a company called Lennar. And Lennar is the nation's largest home builder. And Lennar had created an urban spin-off, essentially, that was primarily working on brownfields projects, old military bases. And most of those military bases were in these urban areas. And there were 2 such military bases in the city of San Francisco, one on Treasure Island, the one in Hunters Point shipyard, and I was overseeing the redevelopment of those 2 bases. Yeah, yeah.
I've been to the shipyard. It's pretty cool.
Some
stuff there. Yeah. So then, San Francisco to Detroit. What was the calling? How did that happen? And
well, I always say to folks that if you've been in development anywhere can be a grind, but development in San Francisco will wear you out. Because the politics of San Francisco, a lot of development is politics, as you know. Yeah. But the politics in San Francisco it will wear on you. I actually had to go to the ballot twice on the shipyard project, and fortunately, I won. But it was a grind, and after 15 years or so, I figured, I've done my bit. It's time for me to retire. So I actually retired.
Oh, you're taking.
I retired in February of 2020.
Yeah.
And my wife and I had all these plans. It's February 2020. All these plans. We had a wedding in Barcelona to go to. We had a cruise to go. We just had plans. It's perfect. Week after I retired, there's this thing about COVID running around. I was like, what the hell? And cruise ships are shutting down, thank God. And that was bad. But then, if you all remember, that was a period of really great civic unrest, too. That was the Breonna Taylor and the George Floyd. I mean, it was really bad. And so here I am with nowhere to go, sitting on my deck in Walnut Creek, which is a suburb of in the Bay Area, and absolutely horrified. And I'll tell you, I was horrified by what I was seeing in the streets and the clear sort of disparities between how the lower income communities are having to deal with COVID, and frankly how the folks with more wealth could deal with it, and how kids in the lower income areas didn't have the digital divide was so obvious and apparent in so many ways. And it was interesting. I remember just sitting there thinking, wow, I've been in this urban development field, either on the public sector or the private sector, for almost 25 years. And man, we didn't do anything right. So it was interesting. When you have nothing to do, you kind of sit out and think about things like this. And I used to be a fellow of the Metropolitan Brookings Institute. And some of the things we would talk about at that time was about urban development. And I had a chance to sort of look at how others were putting things together. And so I had great relationships with, I don't know if you have cats.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So Bruce.
Yeah.
So Bruce and I are pretty close.
Yeah.
And so he and I were talking, and we thought maybe we'd write some papers.
I should clarify. I shook his hand once at a conference.
That's good.
But I know of Bruce.
You know
Katz.
Bruce.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So Bruce and I started thinking about, well, maybe there's some things that we've learned, or certainly I've learned along the way, that maybe we can write papers about. Because I came to the realization that some of the problems that we try to deal with in development, even with the best of intentions, is governed primarily by some of the federal policies.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, and Bruce had been the chief of staff to Henry Cisneros at HUD. And so I had these conversations about, well, why can't the federal policies change to be a little more accommodating of some of these factors? For example, with all the best intentions, developers build affordable housing, right? Those who build affordable housing have all the best intentions.
Right.
But the rules that come typically with affordable housing is if you are of a certain income group, then you qualify, which is fine, that makes sense. But along the way, if you are able to get access to more income, then you may actually have to get out of that housing.
Right.
So essentially, what does that tell you? It means that the folks who are lower income are almost forced to stay in lower income housing places. It creates almost, I said, frankly, just to be a little more dramatic, I said, we're warehousing the poor. That's what you're doing. And one of the things we realized, if you were to have changed the policy and allowed perhaps a way for the poorer folks to find a way to maybe gain equity, maybe translate from renters to owners in their homes, they'd have been able to build up equity in some of the very developments that I had a part in creating. They may actually have the choice to move other places and grow their families just like everybody else. Anyway, the point was you couldn't do that because the federal policies didn't allow that. So anyway, I mean to digress, but those are the kinds of things I was doing as I was sitting on my deck wondering when I would ever get out of the house and go visit the world. And along the way, I got some calls. And one of the calls was a headhunter. And the headhunter said, hey, we're looking for a CEO for Bedrock in Detroit. I said, thanks, no, I'm retired. Hang on. A week later, same headhunter called, and I said, seriously, I'm serious. I know I don't have much to do right now, but I actually have retired. I mean, I'm done with the development game. And it was pretty insistent. And to the point where, because I still had nothing to do, nowhere to go.
Interview.
I had somebody to talk to. It was interesting. He says, well, let me tell you what we like and what we're looking for and what we'd like to do. So I listened. I said, well, that's pretty interesting. And then I remembered that when I was in Cleveland, I'd come through Detroit a few times. And, it wasn't great. so I thought, wow. So what I'm reading is very different from what I remembered. So I said to my wife, maybe we should go out there and take a look at it. Anything to get off the deck and out the house. And so we did. And in the process, we talked to some of the executives in the family of companies, Rocket Mortgage and other places. And I got to, it's middle of COVID. I mean, it's June of 2020 or July of 2020. And it was there weren't a lot of people around, but it was so evident what had happened to Detroit, that it was going through this transformation. But I still wasn't sold on it. In fact, I told the folks, the recruiter and others, I don't know that you need me. I actually think you guys have done a fantastic job, given how, in the time frame that they had taken Detroit from where it was to where it had become. I couldn't imagine that happening anywhere else in just 10 years. So I said, you're doing it. You're doing the right thing. So perhaps I can help you find a CEO, because I'm really retired. Right. They said, well, we'd love for you to meet Dan Gilbert. And so the next day,
fellow Spartan, by the way.
I know. Oh, believe me, I know.
Did you have any relationship with Dan when you were in Cleveland? Did he own the Cavs at that point?
No, he was just
no overlap there.
Gordon Gund owned the anyway.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, if we have time, I'll tell you a LeBron story. But I met with Dan and Jan Gilbert, and I'll tell you, they did all the right things trying to convince me to stay. And at the end, I basically said, okay, I get it, but tell me, Dan, what do you want out? What do you want? You've invested all this money and all this time. What is your vision for all this? And Dan essentially just said, he was the one who sold me. What he said was, I want to return Detroit to its rightful place as a 21st century world-class city. That's all I want. And it was really impactful, because I had been in development a long time, and most of the time, developers want to talk, growing my portfolio, growing my return on net assets, and do this and do that. His had nothing to do with the bottom line. It was all about achieving this vision, because he knew that if he achieved that, if Detroit does indeed get to its rightful place, the rest will follow. And I will tell you, when he said that, I was sold. I said, you know what, I could get off the deck to come work with that vision, because it's so vision and mission driven and not bottom line driven. But if you do everything right at the top end, the rest will follow. And you often hear people tell you, don't worry about the numbers, just execute. And this is an example of that. But it's beyond that, because it also, the clarity of the vision sold me.
Yeah. It's really
that's why I came.
Yeah, that's why you came. Yeah, I love it. And then you entered in the midst of the pandemic. And,
I came and I heard that I had about 560, we don't call them employees, team members. And I said, great. Where are they? Everybody's at home. So now you have to manage through teams.
Right. Oh, not to mention all the people that rent from us aren't coming to work either, right? Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. It was quite interesting, difficult, because you grow some management traits, right? Over the time, you kind of feel the best way to manage people and manage situations, and you have certain habits, and you have certain ideas, and how to build teamwork and establish visions and pull everybody together in a mission, and none of that is through teams.
Right.
None of the way you think. And so relearning how to communicate through the team's environment in COVID, that was pretty difficult. That was pretty difficult.
Yeah.
But we had our first all-team meeting in July,
Right.
in person. So for the first time, I could get up in front of 460 people and say, "Hey, I really am your CEO. I've been here a while. Good to see you all." But it's pretty special, and I just mandated that people come back to the office 4 days a week.
Yeah.
So this is the first week
back.
that we're doing that.
Yeah.
So everybody's going back to in-person meetings, and it's energizing.
Yeah,
It really
feels good.
Feels good.
Yeah. Now, Bedrock has 100 plus properties at this point in time.
136.
136
But who's
properties. Counting? No one's counting other than you, right? That's a lot of real estate, right? Hundreds of thousands of square feet under management.
8 million square feet of office.
I'll add another 0. 8 million square feet of office space. How do you see Bedrock setting the foundation? So I think this is something from like an entrepreneur's perspective or a business owner's perspective. Oftentimes, real estate is just a thing that they'll have to deal with at some point in time. But I think what Bedrock has traditionally done, I think where you're heading with it too, and feel free to share your vision. And I think what probably convinced you to come take this job is that I credit Dan and his team really of thinking creatively about how they set the stage for business to grow in Detroit using real estate. Maybe you can speak to what the foundation is and then where you think Detroit's going from that perspective.
Sure. Well, I always go back to Dan's key vision, right? Putting the city in its rightful place as a 21st century world-class city. That goes it's so much more than buildings. It really is about the community of spaces and places and activities which require people,
right,
and people populating those places and spaces. So what we have done and what we will continue to do is create, not only obviously try to do the best job we can at buildings, but also thinking about the places and spaces in between buildings, putting activities in between those buildings. And it's even, it's interesting. We always believe that. When I was in San Francisco, we always thought about creating sort of places that would spur innovation. And so it's not that different in terms of the thinking, but we're much more intentional now about ensuring that there is communication, there's collaboration between people in the places and spaces between the office and work environments. You want people to get out of their office and walk across a public space that's filled with activity so that they want to come back to that office. And it's so much more important now in this hybrid work from home, because as I say, we have 8 million square feet of office space. We need to make sure that our tenants, the office workers, are coming back to their offices, because we also have 400,000 square feet of retail.
Right.
We have restaurants and bars and all that. And those folks suffered mightily over the last 2 years. So how do you do that? Well, you first of all have to make sure that the office environment works. And part of the office environment is actually what happens outside of the office. When people come to work, they want to go to great coffee spaces. They want to have a nice bar, go to a nice bar. They want to be able to say, hey, look, I was walking down the street and there was this cool roller rink that I decided to go on for 30 minutes. And we have a roller rink downtown in one of our old parking spaces. We have a little putt-putt thing. We have basketball courts. And obviously we have the bars and all that. But we actively program those spaces in the evenings, like around 5 o'clock. We sometimes get DJs into some of the spaces there, and they play different kind of music, and we bring the food trucks in. All this is very intentional, curated, because it's about making people feel excited about coming back. Because if they feel excited about coming back, it's a little easier to recruit that employee. And if it's easier to recruit employees, it's easier to recruit businesses.
Yep.
If it's easier to recruit businesses, I can push my rents up.
Yep. Easy as that.
Easy as that.
Yeah. But there's a lot of investment to make that happen. For those of you who haven't spent time in downtown Detroit, head down there. It's a pretty amazing scene. I love going there because every time I go, it feels different. There's always something has changed.
Yes.
Obviously the pandemic took its toll on some of the retail. but I was just there a few weeks ago I had 65 MBA students there for 2 days, and it felt great.
Yeah, the
right?
first thing we did,
Yeah.
the winter of 2020 was the hardest, right?
Yeah.
And we created a program called Decked Out Detroit. And Decked Out Detroit was fundamentally, how do we get people to come back to downtown Detroit just so that they don't forget the
Yeah.
magic of a downtown? And so we created, one of the ideas was we actually created in one of our parking lots a drive-in movie theater, because people were
Yep.
creating social
Yeah.
distancing. So what better way to get out of the house, but get in a car and drive to downtown Detroit and sit in your car with your family and watch a movie downtown.
Yeah.
It was actually a pretty cool experience.
Yeah.
So we created and curated those experiences very purposefully,
Yeah.
and it was so successful. We've taken that. We keep doing that.
Yeah.
And every season we change the theme.
I love all the experiments. I think it's really cool. What's the thing that most excites you about Detroit right now, or your job at Bedrock?
Boy, there's so many things. We are completing the first 10-year vision of Bedrock. Bedrock's been around 10 years, so there are some major pieces that began 4 or 5 years ago. One of them, of course, is the Hudson's project, which will be
coming out of the ground.
Yeah, it's well out of the ground now. It's going to be about 65 stories tall.
Tallest building in Michigan.
Second tallest next to the Rand's End.
Yep.
And watching that grow every day is kind of fulfilling, because it was struggling at the beginning. The book tower, which is, I think, bar none, one of the best adaptive reuse sort of just projects anywhere in the country, is going to be opening probably the end of this year. It's almost done, and it's just beautiful inside. The historic work that's been done. And some of the cornices, we had to go get artisans from different places to just come and recreate them. It's really beautiful. I encourage all of you, next time you're in downtown Detroit, to look for the book tower and just look it up. It's absolutely beautiful. So that's going to be opening, as I say, towards the end of this year. And so that's sort of the culmination of the first 10 years. So my task is to think about the next 10 years, really. And I've had the pleasure of...
Perfect retirement job.
Yeah. I'm a terrible person to talk about retirement, I know. But but thinking about the next 10 years in context of building the city up.
Yeah.
Right? City building. I tend to think of what we do as city building, not real estate, because of all the pieces that we touch. So I'm looking outside of the core downtown areas, and I put a plan together about 1.5 years ago, and I'm most thrilled by the fact that the pieces are finally coming together.
Yeah.
A plan for the riverfront, and we had to buy some properties and assemble some properties. So within the next, maybe 60 days or so, we'll be able to unveil a riverfront plan that augments the wonderful work the Riverfront Conservancy has done in the Riverwalk.
Yeah.
We'll be building about 2,000 units of residential, again with parks and open spaces and a few other really key entertainment features to augment this fabulous Riverwalk that's there. So it will feel like a world-class riverfront community. We have some really interesting ideas around the Gratiot site, where we think we'll be able to create a unique innovation hub, really build, a collection of buildings, but most importantly, being very intentional about filling those spaces and, with spaces that will force people to collaborate, and working with folks like potentially like the Cambridge Innovation Center to really think about how to not only get the right pieces in place, but to create those events that require collaboration. I had a conversation with the World Economic Forum just yesterday. We founded the Center for Urban Transformation in the World Economic Forum, and they will have a summit in about 3 weeks and the notion is perhaps we can create the global a center for the global innovation districts to come together in Detroit. But so being very intentional about the tendencies in that area so that it just foments innovation. Those things are beginning to come together, and that excites me.
That's really cool. And you got all this stuff in Corktown and the Ford's project. It's pretty neat.
Yeah,
it's good times. All right, this is my selfish question. Then I'm going to turn it over to the audience. My students get bored with me talking about books all the time. What's your favorite book? You have one?
For this class, I'll tell you your favorite books. You sort of go back and reread them.
Yeah.
I tell you, the book I just read. I am a fan of Victorian mystery novels.
That's good. This is what I'm here for.
Right. and there's a book written by Caleb Carr, and it's called The Alienist.
Okay.
It's a fascinating book if you're into Victorian mystery novels.
I can't say
one of the best.
I can't say I've ever attempted, but
if you're not, but
why not try?
Yeah, try it.
We only get one shot.
One of my favorite management books, which I go back to repeatedly, is The Fifth Discipline by Peter Senge.
Okay.
That's a great book because it's not really a textbook. You can pick any chapter depending on how you feel and read that chapter, and it gives you ideas, and it's just I think it's a good management book.
All right, awesome. Yeah. Thank you. All right, it's Q&A time from the audience. Enough of me asking questions. Yeah, what do you got?
What do you think are the key differences between real estate in Detroit versus San Francisco?
San Francisco tends to be developed in spite of itself. The economics generally work to the advantage of the developer. The costs of building are horrendous.
Right.
But the revenue side is usually much higher. By the time you start, what you've projected usually exceeded, sometimes by a fairly significant margin. So you end up in a pretty decent spot. And so what happens is more and more bets are taken in San Francisco because folks believe that at the end of the day, the numbers will work. And because it has shown out over the years, Wall Street tends to believe in development that goes to a place like San Francisco. And so there's more and more money coming in. And so there's more and more development trying to happen. That's on the supply side. On the political side, though, it's interesting because the more development that wants to happen, the harder the political constraint becomes. And that actually squeezes out many projects so that the few that go forward actually get even greater benefit from this. It's a very weird thing. So while everybody's against development, the few that get through do so well that people just keep wanting to try. Whereas Detroit, we're not there yet. Construction costs are still relatively high. And I'm still trying to, it's great to be new and thinking about what the whys. But I believe that part of the issue in Detroit is much of the union work was frankly in the UAW, right? The auto industry. And the push in the building trades wasn't as strong. So the construction costs are high in Detroit, primarily because I don't think there's a lot of workers. All of us are running around trying to find the same workers, and so it enables construction costs to go high. But the construction trades are strong enough, and the political constraints are strong enough that it's not easy to go to Chicago, where there's a ton of workers, and say, "Come over here and work in Detroit." So we're not quite there yet, but I think Detroit's getting there. We're not at the tipping point, but we're getting there. I'm very enthusiastic about the future.
Yeah, right.
I have a two-part question. So,
hold on. That way we can. They're recording. That way.
Hi. So I have a two-part question. One is, where do you see Detroit in 15 to 20 years? And then the other question is, how was your experience working for a mayor, a big city mayor in politics? How has that helped you in business and real estate?
Sure. So, I can tell you that I know that Detroit in 15, 20 years will have one of the world's best riverfront communities. I can tell you that the industrial advanced manufacturing non-auto part of Detroit will be, I think, very, very strong. I do believe that Detroit will begin to capitalize on its. There's some inherent strengths in R&D in Detroit that ultimately in Southeast Michigan that ultimately just leaves the state because the Southeast Michigan doesn't have, other than in the auto and mobility industry, doesn't have a strong, I think, a hold in things, for example, like MSU is one of the top 10 in ag tech R&D. Right. A lot of the ag tech translational research and development isn't here in Michigan.
Yeah, it's in California.
It's in California. So I think there are opportunities to take those innate inherent strengths and capitalize on them here. And I think Detroit's going to find a way to begin to create those opportunities for those strengths to grow here in the same way the auto industry ultimately grew here. So so the advanced manufacturing and innovation space in Detroit will become will be recognized as world class. It's already recognized for the automobile industry, but I think in other really key industries which will help it grow. And candidly, there's a lot more talk. And at first it was joking that the Midwest will be great because the coast will all be underwater. The last couple, it's interesting.
There's people who are relocating because of this.
There are people who are moving into the middle of America because they're just concerned. And I will tell you, as someone who has to participate in business attraction meetings, there are the last 2 years and the supply chain disruptions that are created are forcing very large, important companies to think about locating significant facilities in the Midwest because of redundancy issues. They can't afford another disruption in the supply chain. And some of them, none of them are American. Some of them are in Europe, but they need to funnel their supplies here. So I think Detroit and certainly Southeast Michigan can really take a hold of that. It can grow very well. The second part of your question, working for Willie Brown was one of the most interesting times of my life because Mayor Willie Brown is an extraordinary individual for a number of reasons. But the one I can talk about here is he's literally the person that he will let you sort of try to innovate and think of different things. And if he supports where you're going, he'll push you and push you and push you to try to keep thinking and moving it and executing. And when you think that you've exhausted all opportunities to actually make that thing happen, he'll be the one who will find the way to break down that wall so it can happen. I'll tell you a true story. I was involved in trying to think through some changes in Hunters Point around there was a power plant that was out there, and it needed and nobody wanted it, but in order to disassemble it required some fairly significant legislation outside of the city, and when I finally realized I could do no more, and I heard that it required an act of Congress in order for this to happen. I just threw up my hands and said, enough already. That's it. So I went to him and he says, an act of Congress. Well, that's interesting, Kofi, because I think there's a law that's going through Congress right now. And maybe if we change this, this, and this, we can get this done. And right in front of me, he picked up the phone and called, I think it was Nancy Pelosi, and said, hey, what do you think about this? I mean, that's the kind of guy he was. And that was pretty incredible just to watch that unfold.
Yeah. Other questions? Oh, yeah, over there. Oh, sorry. It's the long walk.
How's it going? I'm Riley. So I've been thinking about this model previously of community-driven development. So like somebody would invest in their local 7-Eleven or something like that, and then in turn would get a portion of revenue or some other kind of incentive from owning that. What do you think about that kind of flywheel of growth in that kind of model?
I think that's actually the right way to think about things. I wouldn't say necessarily the 7-Eleven, but I will say that idea of if people are living in a particular area and they're contributing to it by living in it, they're growing their families in it, they're supporting their commerce around it, to the extent that I always say, if you can create a way to provide restricted shares to folks when they move in, then if they stay long enough and the economics are there, they should get a piece of that appreciation overall. And that's the conversation with the city. Because what happens is all the good efforts of people in communities and investing in communities and keeping the communities really vibrant, it's all their hard work, right? If you think about it, it's this community's hard work. Their property taxes go up because their property values go up, but it's all siphoned off and goes to the city. Wouldn't it be great if the city said, as an incentive, if the property values hit a certain amount and they keep accelerating, some portion of that will go back to the residents of that community because they are part and parcel of why that community is flourishing. And I truly believe that there is something there.
Yeah, almost like a tax dividend or something.
Something like that.
There's an interesting article floating around the internet now about because of the supply chain issues you're talking about, how many small grocery stores have had to close through the pandemic due to supply chain issues. And there's these small towns, mostly in the Midwest and out west, who are buying grocery stores as communities so the last ones don't close. Right? It's a really interesting model. I think the one's like in Erie, Kansas. It just happened where they bought their local Kroger or whatever it was because it was going out of business. So there's some cool stuff on that front. Really interesting. Yeah, right here.
First of all, thank you for coming in and welcome to Michigan State. So I graduated with a supply chain degree and a minor in entrepreneurship, and I'm getting a master in finance right now. And I like, parts of each of those fields, but I don't love anything about like any of them, I guess. So my question would be like, how do you narrow down your passions? And I know you worked a lot of different jobs, but what would your advice to that be?
Well, it's taken me a while to get here, but remember I retired. But I will say, do what you love. In order to do that, you got to discover what it is. It's probably, what you really like to do. And if you're doing what you really love to do, it won't be work. And you should then educate and inform yourself around that which you really love to do. Now, you're young, so it may take a few steps because you thought you loved this, but hell, now you know it. Forget it.
Yeah.
You want to change, but that's okay. That's okay. When I started out, I wanted to be an architect. I was passionate about being an architect until I realized that architects actually didn't make big decisions in community building. They just, Then I wanted to be a developer because I thought developers made decisions, but I didn't have any capital. So I worked for the government. Then I could tell developers what they could do. But no, I think you've just got to find that which you believe you will be passionate about. And in those three, you pick those three things for a reason. So somewhere in there's something you love.
I'll comment. It's just exposure to different things that you think you might like, right? Like we have so much in common. It's crazy. We haven't had a chance to really debrief on that. But I thought I was going to be an architect as well, right? When I was in college, and I job shadowed an architect for a day, and I was like, "This is going to be amazing, right? I can't wait to see the projects they're working on." And then I got to his office, and I'm like, this is the most depressing thing I've ever witnessed. I'm like, so you're telling me you just draw where the electrical sockets go?
Exactly.
I'm like, oh my God, this is what an architect does?
You gotta
Like,
do bathrooms
where's
for
Frank
3
Geary?
years.
Frank Geary doesn't work here, right? Like, so, yeah, you gotta
And
set your
Frank Gehry
expectations.
was 97 and still the architect.
Right, yeah.
They don't go away.
Does
either.
anyone here just draw on paper and hand it off to people, right? Like, so you're the guy who just puts the electrical outlets on?
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, oh boy, I think I'm gonna switch. Yeah, I'm gonna pivot. All right, I think we got time for one more question. We just hit the 7 o'clock hour. Oh man, it's tough. All right, it's your call. Yeah. Front row wins.
Hey, so I have a quick question. Basically, as the CEO of an organization with like 500 employees, how do you ensure that your vision and what you see actually reaches every employee? And how do you ensure that stays with every new employee as well?
That's a great question. Well, first, I always remind folks that it's actually Dan's vision that I've bought into. And part of my job is to ensure that everybody understands within what they do that it's a critical part of achieving that vision. Now, sometimes that's where it gets hard because we have plenty of real estate. And we have our own folks who, in the environmental services who replace the boilers and the chillers, who clean the buildings. We have all levels. And sometimes they don't quite see themselves as being the astronauts that are going on that moonshot. So I have to remind them, and this is what I tell them. I say, look, when I'm recruiting a business, that business, they come to our offices, but first of all, they park. So their first contact with Bedrock is probably in our parking space. We have about 18,000 parking spaces in downtown. So they park in our parking space. So that person, the parking attendant who works for Bedrock, he's my first point of business attraction. So when that person or those people get out of their car and they see, oh, look how neat this is and how courteous this person is, and they realize Bedrock, oh, it's pretty decent folks. Then they come to our office, and our office is spotless and modern and great. And those people who keep it spotless and all that, they say, oh, this is pretty neat. Then we do the dog and pony show. Then we purposely walk them by our construction site, and they'll see the scale of what we're building, and they'll see our guys walking around with Bedrock on it, and they'll say, oh, okay, the Bedrock's doing all this. That's pretty good. And my point to them, and it gets to, and invoices, if we pay invoices on time, people say they're a good business. So the accounting folks realize that they have a part to play in us being seen as a world-class business. So all those folks in the business who don't typically see themselves as the developers and contractors and architects, but they see them, I try to get them to see themselves as integral pieces of that vision making. Yeah. Because with their hard work, I'm able to stand up there and say, Detroit's going to be a 21st century world-class city because look at the experiences you've had from the time you entered the parking lot, passed through our offices, past our activation, that was pretty cool that we put on, past our 65-story construction items, and all that is part of business attraction. Yeah. Because then the business says, oh, I think I can recruit people to come here because this is a pretty cool city. Yeah. I love this residential piece. I know my employees can live here. It's all part of it. So and it's hard and has to be reinforced constantly. People have to be reminded. But that's what I try to do, break it into its component parts and make them realize that we're all developers. It's not just the CEO.
Right. That's a great answer. Well, Kofi, thank you for joining us tonight. I don't know if you have a chance to stick around for a few minutes if there's a couple questions, but
sure.
Thanks for coming to Innovate. Thanks for kicking us off.
Thank you.